The Seahawks stomped out another opponent on Sunday, beating the Falcons 37-9 and bringing their record to 10-3. Former quarterback and current analyst Brock Huard joins me to discuss that, his level of faith in Sam Darnold, and a whole lot more. Let's light him up. I'm Jacson Bevins, and this is Cigar Thoughts. Welcome back to the Cigar Lounge. I am Jacson Bevins, and along with my proprioceptic producer, Mike Barwin, this is the Cigar Thoughts podcast, and I cannot wait to pick Brock's brain on Darnold, the rookies, and a bunch of other things. But first, cigars and whiskey. Cigar Thoughts is proud to be partnered with Seattle Cigar Concierge and Belveni Single Malt Scotch Whiskey. Seattle Cigar Concierge and I have teamed up to release 2 versions of high-quality Cigar Thoughts stogies, both of which you can purchase by following the link on the show page or by visiting cigarthoughtsnfl.com. Mike and I love doing the show, and there are 2 ways y'all listening and watching can help support it so that we can keep the episodes coming. One is by purchasing the cigars, and the other is by subscribing to our YouTube channel at Cigar Thoughts, where you can watch full episodes as well as the funny and insightful clips that Mike puts together. Give a thumbs up to the stuff you like, and let us know what you think in the comments. And of course, you can listen to us everywhere you get your podcasts. The Seahawks, they are absolutely pummeling teams lately, having outscored their last 2 opponents by 54 points and forcing nearly as many turnovers, 8, as they are allowing points, 9, during that same stretch. But despite that success, Seattle has still gone just 1-3 against teams that would currently be in the playoffs. Joining me in the lounge today is someone I'm very excited to talk through this with. As a quarterback in college, he graduated from the University of Washington as the program's all-time leader in passing yards, touchdowns, and passing yards per game before spending 6 years in the NFL. Now, he's a college football analyst for Fox and the co-host of the popular Brock and Sock Show on Seattle Sports Radio 710. He is Brock Huard. Brock, thanks for coming in.
My man, did we do this last year or was it 2 years ago? When was the last time we did this?
We had you on leading into the combine, because I'll never forget you telling me the story of the issuing you the baggy Russell Athletic or Champion clothes, and just the difference between your experience and theirs. But yeah, man, I super appreciate having you back in, and there's a lot to get to. This is stuff you're talking about, most days on your show too, but I want to bring that level of insight and a little bit of a more long form format to the show. So let's just start with this game on Sunday. And look, it was another Drew Lock game for Seattle. This is the 5th time they've been able to bring in their backup, salt the game away, right? I mean, that's an amazing situation to be in. It's a luxury that teams very rarely get. And I mention that only to say that I think that gives us room to look at what happened on Sunday with a little bit of a wider lens than just what happened on the field. And that's because the Seahawks remain tied with the Rams for the best record in the NFC. So what did you see in that game that either gives you confidence or gives you pause as you view Seattle in the landscape of NFC contenders?
Well, I think Drew Lock would be the human cigar, right? When he comes on the field, it's victory. So you should
we're on that Drew Lock in here.
You should probably have him on the show here. He should be the poster on your show because he's a human cigar. That is now the 6th time that they've won by 14 or more. They lead the entire league in scoring differential. I went back and looked at the 2013 Seahawks by comparison, and their scoring differential, I think, ended the year plus 180 something. Seahawks are plus 161. So they're on pace for that. That team blew out 7 opponents by 14 or more. This team has blown out 6. Can they do it again? Will they do it against a beat-up Colts team? Possibly. Rams, probably unlikely. Niners, probably unlikely down there. Carolina's playing better and got some talent. So we'll see if they can get to 7. But whether they do or not, it is, it's been that long since we've had this kind of execution, this kind of effort, this kind of scoring margin. Even the following year, we went back and looked in 2014, they were plus 140. So they've already bypassed that team that went on to a Super Bowl. And in order to get to these marks, it's not a one-off. It's not a fluky, we beat this team 47-0 or 47-7, which can happen in the league. This is like doing it continually and throughout the year. And what I love to answer your question about last Sunday, is I love seeing Sam just get back in a rhythm. That drive before the end of the first half, you could see it bang, 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 ball out on time, on rhythm, on target. And then that continued the whole second half where he was just in fuego and played one of his best halves of the entire season, all over the place, getting the ball out, running, scrambling, intermediate, short. I mean, he was just, we've seen it. When he's on rhythm, it's funny. I've not said this on my show, and I don't know how old you are, if you even remember Dave Craig, but Dave Craig was a pretty darn good quarterback, man. He had a fumbling issue, worse than Sam, smaller hands than Sam. But when that guy got on rhythm and that guy got on target, and you can ask Eric Kennedy, longtime equipment guy, has been there since Dave Craig, and he would tell you, like, that dude in practice was one of the purest throwers and one of the most accurate guys there was. And when Sam is on time and in rhythm, I would say the same thing. Like, he's one of the most accurate quarterbacks, maybe even more so than Russell. And even Matt, I think he's like one of the most accurate quarterbacks when he's on time and on rhythm that the Seahawks have ever had.
Yeah. And I want to circle back to Sam in a little bit from, more of an analytical standpoint, but since you mentioned it, and I think this is something that's really important to hear from people who have been there, but talk to me about the importance of rhythm and or momentum when it comes to playing the position, because it's something that I think intrinsically we all know exists, but because we can't measure flow, it makes it difficult, especially as we incorporate analytics into our analysis of the game, to really put a value on that. Talk to me about the importance of flow, and then tell me what are the types of things that can trigger you into or out of it when you're playing quarterback.
Yeah, I think I like flow or rhythm better than I do momentum. Momentum to me is something that's a little more outside, and certainly quality teams, organizations, players are trying to eliminate that word momentum. And why you hear more of process or rhythm or flow. As a quarterback, I know vividly, probably two games stand in stark contrast for me in college. One of my first games against Arizona State that I came into the game and we end up losing to Jake Plummer. Me and Corey Dillon came into the game in the second half, fourth quarter. And I remember getting on the field like, wow, this is easy. Like, this game is just slow. Like, it's not as fast as I thought it would be. And, here's a completion and there's a throw and I'll just put that one out there. And it was like, just, I don't want to say slow motion, but it was certainly not oversped. And then contrast that to my last year, we went and played at Nebraska, and my skin is still buried somewhere deep in the turf there. It's been replaced a few times in Memorial Stadium, but I could never slow down. From the first snap, we ran a naked, and I got hit, and like, oh my gosh, just as fast. And I'm scrambling, and it's a blur, and like the game is just happening. I'm telling myself, just slow down, just slow the game down. And I just never did that entire game. I remember even Tom Brady talking about this in one of his documentaries. That playoff game, his rookie or his second year, but the first year he got to play. Remember, they went to Pittsburgh? And he actually got knocked out of the game. And he was playing so poorly, and he got an ankle injury. And he's like, I just couldn't slow down. And Drew came in, Bledsoe, and threw a touchdown. And, it was an ugly game. They end up winning and going to the Super Bowl, and then plays great against the Rams. But he was like, I just couldn't slow the game down. Everything was happening so fast. And that's the way I would probably frame it. That kind of just... man, can I slow it down? Can I process? And what gets you out of that? Getting hit. What gets you out of that? A lack of preparation of things that, man, this is not the way we've prepared. It's not the way we expected to see it. The clock speeds up, like you see with pitchers in baseball, where the clock just gets sped up and I speed up into mistakes or judgments or poor judgments. And I think at times in that Rams game, the most indicative of it was Sam this year in the first half of the Minnesota game, where he just gets sped up. And you see it in his feet, in his eyes, in his body. It just not in the same kind of rhythm he's in the majority that we've got to watch this season.
Yeah. And, I'm glad that you spoke about it in those terms, because that's what I see Mike McDonald and this defense doing on the other side of the ball.
Correct.
To quarterbacks, right? And we saw glimpses of this just as football fans when he was defensive coordinator in Baltimore. And, what he did to a Seahawks team that came into Baltimore at 5-2 and just Probably similar to your experience in that Nebraska game, where from the jump, you just get knocked off of your mark. And now you don't have footing for anything that you want to try and do. And it was relentless, right? They never let them out of the blender on that. And
6 first downs. They had 6 first downs. We ended up actually talking about this, last week on our show. Howie Long came on the show, and I love Howie. He's really funny. And he was referencing a conversation he had with John Schneider just a couple weeks ago, and John pointing to that game, because Howie was like, how did he land on McDonald, and kind of talk me through all this. And John said, that game, we left that game and went, how the heck did that just happen? How did they, and even Pete was alluding to, I don't know how they do all that they were able to do. We had no answers, could find 0 answers. 6 first downs, like 117 yards of offense, humiliated. I mean, absolutely humiliated. And they were left, and John was left going, that dude over there, he put a lot together that we could not respond to. And to your point, could never get out of the blender. And we've seen it with Mike over the last 30 games. Right. Yeah. And this year in particular, the way he's made so many of these quarterbacks, heck, even Matthew Stafford had his worst game as a Ram output wise.
Absolutely.
Right, versus this group a couple weeks ago. And now he's got so much speed, got time on task. And in that look, perfect example. Okay. 3rd down, final turnover of the game. Devin Witherspoon shows a look, and Kirk Cousins been around football a long time. Right, he's got all the checks and all the answers, and he tries to quickly check to something, and they quickly check out of it, and it was a bluff, and he throws right into what should have been a quick hot screen answer, and because he's expecting Spoon to come and all the rotation, and they don't, and they show one look, and then at the instant they check out of it and bluff them, and to get someone of Kirk Cousins, Huard, who, physically isn't what he was, but mentally still a really sharp dude in his preparation. And to sting him in that way was a perfect example of what you're speaking to.
Yeah, and I think when I watch this defense now versus what we saw, certainly the first half of last year, but even as they started to get together at the end of last year, this defense feels a lot more fluent in the language that Mike Macdonald wants them to speak than they did. Last year, they could order food at a restaurant. This year, they can hold conversations in that language. And you can just tell that there's no hesitation from anyone. And even bringing in guys like Ty Okada and Tyrese Knight and some of these other people who have had to step in and perform right away, who, that first game when the secondary was depleted and Baker Mayfield tore them apart, you could tell that was communication based, not skill based. I mean, they were just dudes running free, right? They're running combo routes, and both secondary defenders on that side of the field are following one guy. Now there is none of that. And that's compounded by the fact that opposing quarterbacks have no time to go through their progressions. So they're throwing to their first read at a much higher rate than NFL average, which allows Seattle to cheat on the back end. And there's not a running game for them to say, okay, you know what? Let's keep this on the ground for a little bit, soften up this defense. Seattle's the best defense in the NFL against the run. And they're doing all of this without needing to blitz. I mean, it really feels like a hellscape for opposing quarterbacks each and every week.
Yeah, and they're tying, to your point, they're kind of tying in that Russian coverage, which is something Mike says to Salk and I just about every Monday, is one of the real answers. I would say 2 other things that jump out to you if you kind of watch Next Level. Look at the communication between Byron and Leonard and Jaron and D-Law, and look at those guys in real time on the field. Like they're doing things they didn't do a year ago. And Mike gives them a ton of freedom, right? So last year is, here you go, man, here's the menu, and you're reading it, and it's like Cheesecake Factory. It's, 42 pages long. Like, I don't really know what I want. And now it's like, oh no, not only do I know what I want, hey, we're going to figure this out, and we're ordering together, and we're going to just go feast. And they're doing that. And then I would add one other component to it. Tell me one slow guy on the field.
That's right.
You got elite speed and Spoon, elite speed and Woolen, elite speed. Okada can really run. Elite speed up front with your guys. They're just not Drake can really run. Tyrese Knight can really run. Ernest, from like on the goal line, if you were to race, would probably be on the back seven, probably last. But his football IQ and his acumen and his angles and all that he sees, kind of like Lofa used to do, would make up for that and compensate for that. So there's not a slow guy to pick on. There's not somebody you want to isolate. And then up front, Boye and Derek and Leonard for their side. They're so freaking fast.
No,
it's got to be the fastest defense that we have ever seen accumulated through all of their depth as well, because there's not a slow animal to pick on.
Yeah, I mean, you're listing a bunch of guys that were combine all-stars. We haven't even talked about Nick Emenwari yet, who broke the combine.
Oh yeah, that guy. Too.
And and so that's great, but the sides of the NFL freeway are littered with the wreckage of combine superstars that couldn't play at the NFL level, and that, of course, is the concern when you have really raw talent like Reek Woolen or Nick Emenwari or an undersized guy in Devin Witherspoon. But you're right. It feels so cohesive, which I think buys you more margin for error, that if you find yourself a step out of position because no one's perfect, that doesn't cause the whole house of cards to come down.
Yeah.
It's more like a Jenga stack where you can pull one piece out of there and the thing will still stand, versus if everything is not perfect and there's a slight breeze, this whole thing falls apart, which is really what we were seeing from the last few years of the pre-McDonald defense. And so it feels like there's a margin for error there, that as an athlete, you then have so much more confidence knowing I don't have to be perfect. I'm going to try to be, but I don't have to be. And I think there are two starters on this defense now with Love back that are not necessarily all-world athletes by the NFL standard. It's him and Ernest Jones, but to your point, they are so reliable up the spine of that defense and so good, not only with the anticipation you mentioned, but they're guys that would score well in a short shuttle. Like they can get their feet moving to where they need to go quick enough to make up for lack of top end speed. And I don't know, as an opposing offensive coordinator, which part of this defense I'm going to try and target.
Yeah, really difficult. What it becomes is, as I was listening to you too, the thought becomes like play caller offense, quarterback offense. Those are the main processors, right? They've got to process, right? The coordinator's got to process everything, game management, time, down, distance, person, and to make the call. And then the QB, as I referenced with Kirk Cousins, got to process call, got to process look, got to process all of these things in real time. There was a really cool on the QB documentary last year. I don't know if you watched both of those that were done, but Jared Goff gave a really good breakdown of and Joe Burrow, of all the things that they got to process in real time. The advantage and the difference between this group in these 30 games with Mike, and especially the last, as you referenced, last 20 or so, is that Mike's processing speed is elite. Elite. Like, he goes toe-to-toe with that coordinator on the other side. Clint Hurt couldn't do that. Ken Norton couldn't do that. It's Chris Richard. Dan Quinn got a head job. Gus Bradley times got a head job. Like, those guys just couldn't process at that pace. He can. And then you combine the elite speed dudes that get put in the right place with the processor that is Ernest and the processor that is Kobe and Julian on the back end, and it becomes this magical dance right now that we're watching with a defense that truly is one of the league's best and the best we've seen since 14-15.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to overlook how big the difference is from being a good enough defense to being a very good defense. Like, that's a big jump. But to go from very good to the type of defense that we're talking about, and I think there are 4 great defenses in the NFL right now, and that includes the Rams and it includes the Broncos. But I think what we're seeing from the Seahawks and the Texans is even a leap above that. And I think that what gives both of those teams such an advantage is not only, D'Amico Ryans is a defensive genius, and they've got all the guys, right? They got Stingley and Alshire and Daniil Hunter and Will Anderson. They've got the dudes like Seattle does too. But they also don't need to have their personnel dictated by the offense's personnel.
Yep.
And we never saw that more clearly. With the Texans, we saw that when they played the Bills, and they just stayed in base, said, we're just going to beat you in that. And, we saw a lot of that from Pete Carroll, and it worked when you have a Hall of Fame defense. But that got phased out, right?
Yes.
And he didn't have the counterpunch. Mike McDonald has the counterpunch. DeMeco Ryans has the counterpunch, but they don't need to do that as quickly as other teams do. And I think that first game against the Rams, which to my mind is the best defensive performance we've seen from the Seahawks in 10 years. The whole thing was the Rams were killing everybody out of 13 personnel and averaging like 9 yards a play doing that, which is absurd from heavy personnel because every other team would go, oh, well, we got to go heavy personnel then. And then they just get torched in the passing game. Seattle just said, all right, we're going to stay in nickel.
Yep.
We got Nick, we got Devin. They're basically linebackers in our secondary. Come get us. And the Rams averaged under 3 yards per play out of 13 personnel in that game, which is the worst performance of McVay's career out of that personnel. So it just feels like even if you were able to crack the code on the athleticism over the over aggressiveness or the whatever, maybe a schematic advantage, you still can't beat them on personnel. And that feels special.
Yeah, it does. And that's what elite defenses do. And again, in our lifetime, 10, 11 years ago, we got to see that. And that mantra from that group was, you got to deal with us. You got to deal with our post high, whether it's man or three, how we just change and manipulate week to week and tweak a little bit within the structure, right? What Mike would call the methods, with the system. And you got to deal with us. And this group is becoming that kind of group. You got to deal with us. The Rams, the Broncos, the Texans, heck, even the 49ers, to be honest with you, Jacson. Like, look at what they've done minus posts. Can you imagine?
If they still had
Warner, yes.
I would absolutely have put them in the conversation. Yep. It's literally just personnel that's keeping them out of it because Saleh is that dude.
Yes, and you got to deal with us. And, whether we're playing nickel, whether we got dime, whether we got base, no matter the 8 guys that we rotate up front, it doesn't matter. Even now with, the injuries and the depth that you've built in the secondary to be playing Job and to be playing Okada and to play and feel good about these guys. Like, you got to deal with us. It's a constant back and forth. Offenses want to dictate. They want to do it with their personnel. They want to do it with formations. They want to do it with shifts, emotions, and their plan. And it's always the offensive mindset. Like, we get to dictate and you got to react. The elite defenses, and we got a handful of them this year in the league, 4 or 5 deep. I can't remember the league having this in some time, having that many that say, no, you don't get to dictate. And we don't have to react. We're going to dictate, and you got to react to us.
Yeah, I mean, even that next tier down with the Eagles and the Chiefs and the Niners are playing defense at a level that would have been considered elite in years past. And it's kind of a cool, we preach this all the time on this show. You can speak to it better than I can, but the NFL is cyclical, and dad football is making a comeback in a big way. And teams that are running the ball and playing great defense are winning again. And it's cool to see. And we're seeing a lot of these top quarterbacks get knocked off their perch this season. Mahomes and Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts. And some of these guys that have been considered at the very tops of their games are looking really flustered out there. Josh Allen has had some real stinkers in this game, in this season. And so Stafford seems to be the only one that's remained above the fray. I mean, the wheels have fallen off with Baker Mayfield. They were talking about him as a MVP candidate the first month and a half of the season. So with that in mind, I want to circle back because the thing that I was most excited to talk to you about today is getting a quarterback's perspective on the Seahawks quarterback. And I do my best to understand football and the quarterback position as well as I possibly can. But it's one thing for me to praise or criticize what Darnold is doing, or any other QB for that matter. And another thing entirely for you, who performed at a high level with this skill set, to do it. So I'm going to ask you, what do you see when you watch Sam Darnold play?
Yeah, an old analogy that Coach Holmgren used to say to us, and to me in particular, is he would say, I need you to be more artist than just blacksmith. And the point being that, when we call, green left, fox 3, XY hook, and you make a good fake, and you're going to read, the Y first on low option route, and then you're going to come back, and you're going to progress to the X on the deep curl, and then you got the outlet to the fullback in the flat, and oh, by the way, if they run quarters coverage, and that option route holds that safety, there's the alert to the post. Like one of the most basic, first day install West Coast system, like, got it. Can run this. I can run it like a blacksmith. I could put my gloves on. I could put my goggles on. I could, use the tools. And here you go. I can create this. And when Sam is a blacksmith, he's as good as anybody in the league. The numbers tell you that. Like when it's clear and he can plant his foot and throw, and single hitch and throw, and he go from boom to boom to boom as you see his eyes and his feet connected. And Chris Collinsworth really brought that to life in a beautiful way in Sunday Night Football. And I think that's one of my favorite crews to watch, because while Chris didn't play quarterback, he sees it through that lens and those optics, and they try to really show, and they've got such great camera work and director and producer and Tariq, like all of them, and they paint that picture. And that game in particular really showcased him as a blacksmith. Now, when the game breaks down, can you be an artist? And I couldn't. In the West Coast system, I just was not good. Got knocked out of a game because of it, an all-out blitz, and I got fooled, and instead of being able to spin out of it, I got my kidney dislodged and knocked into the hospital. Like that happened to me. When the play breaks down, he's got a little more elusiveness and athleticism than I ever did. And frankly, this last game, I loved his movement. I loved him getting out of harm's way. A couple times still down the field looking to throw. A couple times scrambling for first downs. Like, that's the whole key to me. When he has to morph from blacksmith to artist, what's that look like? How pretty does that picture? Does he avoid catastrophe? And does he, create artistically something that just avoids a negative, and if anything, makes the big play possible too?
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think that the list of quarterbacks who can do both at a high level is a lot shorter than a lot of people think.
Yes,
right?
It is. Yes, it is. Even Matthew Stafford. If you get and look at the first Seahawks game, like, they made him mortal, right? When he's got to just dump the ball. The game he played last year against the Seahawks, he only started one, got to sit the last game. I think they had 8 3-and-outs in that game, somewhere along that number, and they just made him ditch the ball. Like, he's not one that will run around and create but as a blacksmith this year, like, Sean McVay has given him the tools with Devontae and Puka and a run game and screen game and 3 tight ends. Like, yeah, man, I can just operate in this fashion, and he's going to be the MVP, he or Drake, because of it.
Yeah, to me, it's the difference between baking and cooking. And when you're baking, you really got to stick to the recipe. Like, it's all about the recipe in terms of that coming out and how well can you follow instructions. Cooking, there's more room for flair. There's more room for artistry, and you can play around with that recipe a little bit more. And Sam is a baker, and that's okay, because I think for the first time in a long time, Seattle has a play caller that actually has good recipes.
Yep.
That being said, there was a stretch there, and I'm not saying that it's over just because he had a good second half of this last game, but there's been a stretch very recently where Sam Darnold has looked knocked off of his mark a lot. And in that second half, and really you pointed out the last drive of that first half where they got the game-tying field goal, and then his wheels up from there, it was that offense that we saw in the first 2 months of the season. It was sail routes and time to get out of the pocket and move with the flow of the play instead of against it, and to have a chance to find a secondary option. And for the first time since Torrey Horton got hurt, we saw secondary options winning and providing a reliable outlet for Darnold when JSN isn't as open as he's been so often this season, which then in turn opens things up for JSN. I think if Rashid Shaheed can continue to do what we saw on Sunday, then it changes everything for this team. But I can't overlook what we saw in the 4 to 5 weeks before this second half. So what were you seeing defenses doing that either Kubiak or the offensive line or Darnold was struggling with? And is that repeatable from the good defenses that they're going to be playing down the stretch and in the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, it was the Rams, right? You kind of pointed to the Rams was kind of the first real look at that. And they did defensively what Seahawks do. They did.
Yeah, but he got away with a lot against the Titans and the Vikings too.
He did. He did. Yep. So was the Titans before the Rams game? No, that was
No,
after.
right after.
So
Yep.
it started, but it started, right? The rhythm, the MVP talk, the number one QBR, the number one, like all of that kind of ended with the Rams game with 4 picks,
That's
a
right.
bunch of them really bad.
Yep.
And they're, again, the Rams dictated. They played their defense. And they were able to play a defense like the Seahawks like to do against opponents that nobody else really, to that point, had done against Seattle. So a lot of speed on the field, a lot of tight windows. All of a sudden, like, oh my gosh, I'm a beat late and it's a pick. I'm a beat late and it's a pick. Now I'm trying to create and I'm going to do a jump pass. It's a pick. Like it just, it all went south. And then he responded the last 2 drives of the game. And gosh, if they would have just operated a little quicker on the final drive, it's a 55-yard game winner and it's not a 61-yard miss. But
Right.
that was in. It's over. Flush that. Tennessee, yeah, I mean Tennessee, there were still some big plays, and then really it was Minnesota dictated. So I think that's the whole thing, and maybe that's oversimplifying, but it was LA and Minnesota in that first half really fully dictated. It was Atlanta to a degree dictating, like, hey man, we're going to put numbers around here, and you're going to have to deal with this, and you're going to have to deal with these windows. And thankfully, then the Seahawks offense said, enough. Nope. If you're going to put 8 around the box and you're going to play single safety, we're going to get back to our down the field throws, which I think is where he's at his best. Push me back against my little studio here and soundproofing, like back against the soundproofing. What do I love that Sam Darnold does? I love the intermediate and deep ball. And every time he throws it and it leaves his hand, I'm like, little kid at Christmas.
He's
Here we
so
go.
good at that.
Oh
He's
my
so
gosh.
good at that.
His deep
Yep.
overthrows and yeah, there were some sales, but a ton of those were the deep overs to Rashid and to JSN. He throws that as well as anybody. Like his anticipation, if you could see in real time in the pocket, Jacson, like when he releases that ball, where he is leading these guys to in stride.
Every time they show
Awesome.
time they show a sky cam replay of his second and third level throws. I mean, first of all, every time they show that view, I wonder how anyone completes more than 10% of their passes in the NFL. But Sam, especially this year, and it reminds me so much of the first year and a half of Geno as the starter in Seattle, where just the balls on this dude with these throws where, he is throwing guys open, right? Yes. And of course, he has the benefit of the guy who's been the best receiver in the NFL this year. For sure, that helps. But you can tell when he's feeling confident because he is really stepping into those throws and throwing with anticipation. When he has turned the ball over, which he's done more than any player in the NFL this year, it is when he is forcing that. And it feels like the line is so thin between throwing with anticipation and forcing a tight window throw.
It is. It is. Probably the perfect picture of that was the interception to Arroyo versus Rams, where he's running a vertical and a seam, and he's trying to throw him open, but unfortunately the window with the backer dropping and the safety sitting over the top, there was zero. The interception to Arroyo last weekend where he's running to his left, and he thinks he can, on the move, throw him open, but there was no, unfortunately, window that opened there. So, yeah, it's a little bit of the catch-22. If you want to play with great anticipation and plant your foot and get that ball out and throw people open, then ultimately, they got to get to that window, and you got to make sure your judgment of that window is actually open and not closed. So he walks that line. It is a fine line. It is a fine margin. Yeah. But man, it is fun when he rips it and he throws those second and third level throws. I don't know. There's few in the game doing it right now because a lot of people will check it down, or a lot of people will, it's him and Stafford and Drake May. Like it's only a handful of guys that are really pushing the ball down the field in that way. And I, for one, am exhilarated every time it comes out of his hand.
Totally. And the metrics back this up. I mean, he's in the top right of every graph when it comes to especially throws beyond 15 yards where, whether you're talking about completion percentage, where you're talking about on target rate, all of this stuff, he is excelling at catchable ball percentage, all of that stuff. And it makes a very multifaceted quarterback. He's not a guy that you can just say he is this type of quarterback because he has all of these high level throws. He's mobile enough that you can't count on him just being a statue. He's also incredibly turnover prone, has been his entire career. And so I want to ask you one last question with Sam. Given that this defense is top 2, I think pretty confidently in the NFL right now, let's just say that they're a top 5 defense moving forward for as long as this season goes. How confident are you with 10 being, prime Tom Brady, prime Patrick Mahomes, whoever, and 0 being, whatever, a guy that you feel no confidence that you're going to win a Super Bowl with? How confident are you right now in Sam Darnold to get this team deep into the playoffs, to an NFC Championship game or further? And do you need to see anything down this stretch to make you more confident?
Yeah, probably a 7. I would say a 7 in that regard. And what you need to see are those moments against the Rams and the Niners. Carolina's got a good group up front as well. Like Indianapolis is not bad. Obviously they're.
Carolina's the only team to turn Matthew Stafford over in 3 months.
That's right. So, you kind of just need to continue to get those data points. And, when it comes to probably close games that you're going to get in some of those. And, I like to have fun with Saul because he always reminds me, he's 1-3 in these games. Like, okay. But he also did something.
2-3 now that the Texans are in the playoff picture. That was before Sunday night. Yeah.
But Saul says 1-3 in game ending drives, right? San Francisco.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
The Rams, he got the one, but so 1-3 in these games where you got
Tampa Bay,
Yep, the Tampa Bay interception. So but part of me is like, okay, well that game was 6-6, last weekend, and is it his fault he played so good that they sprinted away from? There's also something that I don't necessarily need to see all of these, or to muck it up and play ugly and have a 1-score game in the final 5 minutes. I'll be just fine if he wants to just be on fire, and him and Jacson and the whole offense hits explosive plays. But that is the last data point. Hey man, when it gets tough and it gets tight, can you protect the football? Can you navigate this line? I think I've said this to you before. Play smart, not scared. Tom Moore, my old coordinator in Indy, used to say that all the time. Play smart, not scared. Play smart, not scared. And it just kind of reinforce that and yell that. And Sam never plays scared. I think it's why his teammates love him. It's why Mike McDonald loves him. He'll take ownership when he fails. But I think his teammates carried him on their shoulders in Minnesota. I think these guys love him here because he never plays scared, right? To not make a mistake. I'm going to let it rip, man. I'm going to let it rip. But on the other side,
you heard Ernest Jones say that after the Rams loss, which was and that's great. That's great leadership, great teammate.
By the way, a lot of QBs throw a pick or two and go into check down mode and protect themselves mode and cover their own butt mode, and he won't do that. I'm not going to do that. And teammates love that. Now, fans and coaches and analysts and championships are often won by those that manage the first side of that phrase as well as they do the second. Play smart.
Right.
Play smart, man. Yeah. Protect the ball. Yeah. Come on, 2 hands on the ball. Come on, man. Get the pocket breaking down. Take a sack every once in a while, right? Play smart, not scared.
That's right. And I am the last person who's going to penalize a player for a team winning by a lot, right? It's not that I need every game to come down to it and I need to see him lead 7 fourth quarter game winning drives to believe that he has it. Mm-hmm. And I'm not even saying that blowouts don't happen in the playoffs. They do, but they're a lot less frequent. And it makes intuitive sense to think that Seattle is going to be playing a lot more close games from here on out than they have up to this point. Right. Yep. Because, Brosmer and, an ancient injured Kirk Cousins without his number 1 receiver. And now it's going to be either Riley Leonard or Brett Rippon this week, Cam Ward and Jacoby Brissett. These are not the quarterbacks that this team is going to be facing. Right. The Seahawks aren't going to be giving up 4 points a game from here on out. That's just the fact of the matter. So I'm very, very curious to see whether he can take that step. I remember when Geno took over as the quarterback for Russell Wilson, and he played pretty well in relief and then had turnovers at the end of all of those games as the backup. And then, had kind of a slow start in terms of that situation. I was like, this is the last thing I need to see from Geno. He's doing all these other things well. I needed to see him win those games. And then, he ended up having the most fourth quarter game winning drives in the NFL the rest of his time in Seattle, but he also put them in a lot of those close games that they didn't need to. And Darnold hasn't been doing that, which is great. I want to pivot now because you do a ton of work for college football and you've grown into just a remarkable collegiate analyst. And I know that a lot of it is getting ready for specific games, but you keep an eye on the entire landscape. And that provides you with a unique perspective on some of these players that Seattle has drafted over the last couple of years. And, is there such a thing as a great drafting GM? I don't know. I think GMs can get really hot for a while because we've seen that. We've seen that with Seattle's own GM. But all the data analyst says there's very few outliers. Water typically finds its level. And John Schneider ran cold for a while in the draft after those first 3 years. But it seems like he is back on his shit these last few years. What are you seeing from some of these rookies and second-year players in terms of either meeting, not meeting, or surpassing your expectations of them coming out?
Yeah, I think if you go back and look, I think there was something to the institutional knowledge that Pete Carroll had coming out of SC for those 3, 4, 5 years, recruiting all these players, knowing and having background that others didn't have, and pairing that with John and being able to say very clearly, "It's what we're going to do, man. We're going to run, this defense, and we're going to be a post high, and we're going to need speed." And they worked their magic together. And some of John's background and Pete's background, you're right. Those first 3, 4, 5 years, phenomenal. And then they would tell you the roster got so good that they had to take risks, right? That, you signed and all these guys to
there were no starting spots available.
There was not competition.
There were no starting spots available for these rookies.
That's right. Yeah. So, what are we going to do? Are we going to just go down that path, or are we going to be creative and take some risks? And they took some risks and some swings and misses and more misses, as you said, than hits. And I think if you talk to them now, what you find, and I know John's been blown away by Mike Macdonald's clarity. This is what I need. Kind of like Pete early, like, this is what we're going to have. This is our vision. This is what I need. And Mike really wanted Nick Eamon-Worry. Like, that was I got to get this guy. And they thought they had to deal with Howie Roseman for the 31st pick in the first round, and Howie kind of blew that off at the end. And so they circle right back at the top of the second round and make sure they get that guy to fit exactly what Mike Macdonald wants. The clarity, he's concise, he's blunt, he knows what he wants. And I think time on task together, it's not a surprise that, they've hit a couple home runs here because Mike's very deliberate, very clear, works right beside. For the life of me, I never understood why some of these teams are like, "Oh, you just go to the combine. Oh, you just go to the Senior Bowl. Yeah, we'll stay back and we'll game plan and we'll script." Like, no, you saw Mike Macdonald in the box there with Schneider and Indy for all 4 days. You saw them on each other's hip at the Senior Bowl for the whole week. Like, those guys need to get on the same page together. They are. And they've hit a bunch of home runs.
So is it safe to say that Macdonald has a fair amount of influence on these selections? Because it was billed as, okay, this is John's show now at the beginning.
No, because John's egoless, and he knows, like, the only way this works is that I get you the clay that you want. I can have my eye on this clay that I think is beautiful and could be molded into this, but I need to make sure you like this clay. And obviously the traits align. They love speed. They love really fast guys, right? The Nike Spark numbers of their guys, and even the guys they sign off the street as undrafted, are typically, there's a tell there that I want this and I need this. And John likes it, Mike likes it. But then it's really, talk to me more. Talk to me more. Help me understand more of exactly the kind of clay you want to mold. And they've been in pretty darn good sync here the last couple of years.
Did you see this level of performance and immediate impact from Nick Eamon-Worry coming out? Because
no.
I think that there is a really interesting parallel in that, to me, he strikes me as the DK Metcalf of defense. And Seattle was able to, and by that I mean a size speed freak that looks very raw, right? Like tremendous straight line speed, but Eamon-Worry got washed out in coverage a lot in college. And when he was in position to make a play, he would make big plays, but you could scheme him out. And then they bring in this raw kid, and it's not like, okay, hey, we're going to have you learn safety first, or you know what, we're going to use you as a sub package nickel linebacker or whatever. It's like, nope, you're going to have your hand in the dirt 6 plays a game. You're going to edge rush. You're going to play in the box. You're going to drop back in coverage. You're going to carry crossing routes. It is a lot to give a guy. What we saw this last week is something that I was confident we would see from Nick Emenwari in year 3, not in December of year 1. I cannot believe how quickly he is meeting these insane expectations for him that McDonald put forth back in training camp.
Yeah, I think I'll point to him and Spoon in a similar vein in that way. Spoon coming out of Illinois with UW coordinator Ryan Walters was press man, and his numbers and his metrics were off the charts. And it's why Detroit would have taken him with the next pick after Seattle in that draft, and were bummed when Seattle took him because his playing speed and his man-to-man coverage were so elite. The question then was, okay, what more? How much more? And I'll come back to that word I used earlier today, processing. How quickly can you process all this information? We know you can run really fast. You have great play speed off the field, and you test out off the charts, but can you process fast enough? And for Emenwari, I think it was a similar thing. People say, ball skills, instincts, I don't know, in space. But you didn't know what was asked at South Carolina. Right, just like in that scheme playing man-to-man at Illinois, like you didn't know, like you wasn't asked to do these high-level things. Right. And could he pick it up? And could he learn the language? And could he process? And could he see all of that? And yeah, I think it has been more than a pleasant surprise with Nick. He's been off the charts as this thing's gone along. And give some credit to Mike. And he would say, "Don't give credit to me. Give credit to the staff. Give credit to the secondary coach. Give credit to his teammates. Give credit to all the people, all the inputs that go into him doing this." That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah, and I really do feel like timing matters a lot with the Emenwari pick, because if he was dropped into this defense last year, I think it's going to look like a player who's a lot more out of his depth. But circling back to what we were talking about earlier, when everybody else is minding their P's and Q's to the level that Seattle has done this year, it provides freedom for a player like Emenwari to see ball, get ball, than it is to really make sure he's considering all the possible range of outcomes. And a player like him that is a hunter as opposed to a reactor, it really allows this team to weaponize him. Another player that I want to ask you about, because we could do this all day with the number of contributors Seattle's brought in the last few years as rookies. But the other guy that I want to ask about is Byron Murphy, because I championed the pick when they took him, and I thought that he played well in limited snaps last year, but it did not show up in the box score. And there were a lot of folks, fans of the Seahawks and analysts nationwide, they're just like, maybe this was a miss. I saw a guy who was winning pretty consistently, but not finishing. This year, he is finishing. And it makes me think of one of the most interesting conversations we had about the NFL is nature versus nurture for young players. And in your experience, and then not only as a player who went through the process, but who's now been covering the league for so long, how important is the environment versus talent when it comes to actually succeeding during that rookie contract?
Yeah, I think that's dependent a little bit on position too, Jacson, I would say. I think there's some positions that are a little less needy in that nurturing part, and then there's some that are really needy. And I think the line of scrimmage is a really needy, nurturing position. Had Byron gone to, remember that, again, kind of to the Spoon, the Lions were going to take him. Had the Seahawks not taken him, he was going to be a Ram, because those guys, Les and McVay, and they knew the kind of upside he had, and they tried to trade to get up ahead of the Seahawks and even find a way to take him. And he gone there, he'd be a stud. He would be flourishing like he is here in year number 2. Culturally, pieces there and everything. Had he gone to Cleveland, had he gone to Cincinnati, had he gone to, I don't know, any number of other programs that don't have great alignment, Vegas, I don't know if he's doing this in year 2. But with Leonard, and with Jaron, and he would point to D-Law and these boys in that room with Mr. Dirty, like there's there's no way you're not going to develop. Like there's no way you're not going to play to this standard and you're going to grow to this standard. So I think nurture's been a big part of the standard and the expectations that are set in that room.
Last thing before we get you out of here, give me a quick Colts preview and less so like predict the score or this or that. Tell me what you're looking for, because Seattle's going to open. I haven't looked at the line, but it's probably going to be,
I think it's about 10.
A 2 touchdown.
I think it went from 7 to 10. Yeah,
oh, man.
The last time I saw that.
I'm just hammering that line because I don't see anything with what we've seen from the Colts in the last month, and especially now without their quarterback, that makes me think they're anything like the team that started off 8-1, 7-1. And so what do you need to see from this team to keep you feeling good going into that game of the year against the Rams next week?
Yeah. Well, I think you saw a little bit of the Falcons do what you have to do against these kind of defenses, and that is volume run game. And Bijan and that crew, that game was 6-6 because they controlled the ball.
Yep.
And here was 4, and here was 3, and here was 5. And they were just like, hey, we're going to shorten this game. We're going to shorten possessions. We're not going to put the ball in harm's way. We're not going to get into pass situations. And we're going to try to stay on schedule and control the ball as much as we can. And Bijan's really good. And Matthews, the left tackle there in Lance, really good. And they were capable of doing some of that. And with Jonathan Taylor and that left guard and that right tackle, they got some people that can move the line of scrimmage. Mm-hmm. And Shane Steichen,
he's
if
good.
You ask Mike McDonald,
Steichen's good.
If you ask McDonald, yes, to say, hey, who are 3 or 4 of the best guys that you've gone chess against, he would put him on that list. Like, he's really good with McVay and Shanahan and everything else. So unlike Minnesota with Brosmer and a beat up O-line, nope, Indy's backs are against the wall. They still are alive. They're not dead like Atlanta. They're not dead like Tennessee. They're not dead like the Vikings. They're on life support, and this is it. And they're going to come in and try to run the ball. And they've got a few more assets than some of these teams of recent vintage have. So I would like to see getting them in passing downs and, creating the takeaways they have and continuing to operate the way they have. But this will be a tougher test than these last 3. And I think will be a good test before that Thursday nighter.
Yeah, I think the thing that I am wanting to see the most, and it's something that I'm pretty confident we will see, and you can tell me if this is just like, hey, of course you think that because, you haven't been there, or if you think there's real value to this. But I want to see them kick their teeth in the first half and get up by enough that they can start thinking about the fact that it's a short week with a massive swing. I mean, we just saw the Bears lose a very close divisional game on the last play, and they went from number 1 in the NFC to number 7. That is just how it works. Whether it's right or wrong, that's how it works. And we're talking about the difference with the outcome of that Rams game, most likely determining whether Seattle has home field advantage or are road warriors through this playoffs. So are you trying to, as a coach, are they thinking, at least in the back of their minds, let's get up by a lot so that we can get Velus Jones and Drew Lock and some of these, Cody White and some of these other guys in there? Or is it
the human cigars?
Yeah, yes, exactly. And have these guys rested up for a short week?
No, there's 0.0 of that, because I would point to even the Atlanta game as being instructive in this way, right? It was 6-6. I mean, it took a kickoff return, and then you saw them, the onslaught begin. And what happened? You came out of that game, and Julian played 20 snaps. Awesome. D-Law played 28 snaps. Awesome. Leonard played in the low 30s. Awesome. So you don't know how the game's going to take shape. And if you try to force the game and say, hey, Sam, let's be aggressive. Let's take some shots. Let's do all of this. I think that could be counterproductive. You do what you do. And then in an ideal world, it takes shape like it did last week. And hey, the game's in control. And we do get to minimize those snaps. And oh, by the way, the nice thing is we get to be at home. And short weeks at home matter. The Seahawks bucked that trend by going to Arizona on a Thursday. I don't know what the numbers are in the totality of the season, but I know over the years, Yeah, it's a big advantage for the home team. So, sure, you'd like to see it unfold that way. There is no guarantee. And if you come out and you try to force that issue, my life experience, kind of like hitting 3-wood on that first par 5, when it's just pushing my limit, like, it'd probably be smarter to lay up here and just play the right kind of game. That tends to pay more dividends.
Yeah. Nothing worse than waiting for the green to clear from 240 out and then just chunking that shot.
And your buddy's like, are you serious? You made us wait?
Yeah.
You made us wait?
Totally. Listen, Brock, thank you so much for your time today. I know what incredibly busy time of year this is for you. So it means a lot that you took the time and lent your insight to the conversation.
Always fun, man. Always fun. And this is a cool team. It's the first time, and I think sometime we done these 5 years ago, 7 years ago. I don't think this is a Super Bowl contending team at that point. It's a in this NFL this year. This is a Super Bowl contending team, and if Sammy plays that smart, just blacksmith, just dialed quarterback, I don't think there's a team in the league they can't beat, no matter what the stage is.
Yeah, it's been a long time since it felt like you didn't have to have the best quarterback to win the Super Bowl. And this year is proving itself to very possibly be that type of season. Brock, thank you so much, man.
You got it, man. Enjoy the holidays.
All right, y'all, that is going to do it for today. Once again, a huge thank you to Brock Huard for making time to come in and chop this all up with us. I just am so appreciative of the way that he approaches this and the honesty with which he speaks, and grateful to have him as always. You can find Mike and I on social media. I am on Twitter and Blue Sky at Jacson Bevins. That's Jacson. Remember that no K is okay when spelling my name. Mike is on both at Mike Barwin, and the show itself is at Cigar Thoughts on Twitter and at CigarThoughtsNFL.com on Blue Sky. You can also catch full video episodes on our YouTube channel at Cigar Thoughts. Find the rest of our socials at CigarThoughtsNFL.com. As I mentioned earlier, this episode is brought to you by Balvenie Premium Single Malt Scotch Whiskey. Y'all know I'm a huge fan of their lineup, and we are thrilled to have them on board as a sponsor of the show. And one of the great things about a great Scotch is how well it plays with a good cigar. So once again, we do have our own special releases of cigars that you can purchase at a terrific price as a listener of the show. These Cigar Thoughts Stogies, they've been successful enough for us to continue offering them for the low, low price of $149. That's right, just $149 for a bundle of 10. As many of you know, we partnered with one of the most prestigious cigar manufacturers in the world to release these official Cigar Thoughts cigars, which you can order directly from CigarThoughtsNFL.com. Just follow the link on the show page to get these easy-to-smoke stogies rolled with 13-year aged premium Dominican tobacco leaf, or hit us up on Twitter or Instagram and we'll send you the details directly. The cigars come with a Bovita humidification pack and a Mylar storage bag to make sure they stay fresh, whether you have a humidor or not. Of course, you can listen to this show at fieldgoals.com and everywhere you get your podcasts. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and you like the show, drop us a 5-star rating and leave a quick review. Thank you to all of y'all listening for your continued support of this show. We know you've only got so much time for podcasts in your life, and it is an honor to be a part of that for y'all. Thank you to everyone who's been shouting us out on their Spotify Wrapped and their years in review on Apple Podcasts and YouTube Music this year. It does mean a lot. Please know that by sharing the show on social media and with your friends, you give us the juice to keep making this happen. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, onwards and upwards, my friends.